The penthouse office hung suspended above Boston like a throne room floating in darkness. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city in night, the harbor lights scattered like fallen stars, and Luca Castellano stood motionless before them, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. 42 years old, 6'3", shoulders broad enough to carry empires, he wore a custom charcoal suit with the white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the dark chest hair and a silver chain that caught the light like a whisper of wealth. His dark eyes burned with the kind of intensity that made men confess sins they had never committed. A thin scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, a souvenir from his father's fists when he was 7 years old, a permanent reminder of what mercy looked like when it came from a monster. The tablet in his hand glowed with security footage. Black and white. Timestamp, 9:17 p.m. Tuesday night. Sofia Morgan slipped through the side door of his building, a worn backpack slung across her shoulders, a plastic grocery bag clutched in her right hand. She glanced over her shoulder 3 times in the span of 8 seconds. 3 times. Like a thief. Like a traitor. 6 weeks, Luca said, his voice low and solid like an oath carved into stone. I bring her in from the cold. I give her a bed. Work. Salary. Security. Everything a woman in her situation could dream of. And this is how she repays me. Behind him, 2 men stood in absolute silence. Bruno, his right hand for 15 years, thick-necked and scarred, tattoos creeping up his forearms like ivy claiming a wall. Gino, younger, sharper, with the kind of eyes that noticed details other men missed. Both of them had learned long ago that when Luca Castellano spoke, the world held its breath. 3 weeks, Bruno said quietly. Every Tuesday. Every Thursday. 9 p.m. exactly. Out for 45 minutes, then back. Different burner phone each time. She keeps it in the parking garage, behind the concrete pillar. The tablet flickered. Another angle. Another timestamp, 9:19 p.m. Sofia stood in the shadows of an alleyway 6 blocks from the building, her thin jacket pulled tight around her frame. She was so small. So fragile. So utterly capable of being broken. And she's talking to someone, Gino added. His voice carried the weight of a confession. We got close enough on Thursday to hear fragments. She said, I know it's dangerous. I know what they do. But I can't leave her there. Leave who? Luca's jaw tightened. A muscle flickered beneath the scar on his cheek. In the Castellano family, in the underworld that had raised him since childhood, betrayal had exactly one price. Death. He had executed men for less, men who had served him loyally for years, men who had bled for him, who had gone to prison to protect his name. If a lieutenant could be a traitor, then anyone could be. If anyone could be a traitor, then trust was a luxury, and luxuries got you killed. Find out who she's meeting, Luca said. The words came out like ice water poured into a still room. Find out what those plastic bags contain. Find out what she whispers about in the dark. And when you know everything, come back to me. He did not turn around. He did not need to see their faces to know what was happening there, the grim understanding, the knowledge that they were about to destroy a woman who had done nothing but be grateful for her salvation. But that was the job. That was the price of working for Luca Castellano. You did what was necessary, and you did not ask questions about mercy. Behind him, their footsteps receded. The elevator doors opened with a soft pneumatic hiss and closed again, leaving him alone with the city and its 10,000 secrets. But Sofia Morgan was not betraying him. At that exact moment, she was washing her face in the fluorescent-lit bathroom of a gas station on Hanover Street, her hands trembling like leaves in a hurricane. The mirror above the sink showed a woman who looked older than her 28 years. Her hair, once dark and thick, hung thin and lifeless past her shoulders. Her cheekbones stood sharp enough to cut glass, a map of poverty written across her face in the language of missed meals and sleepless nights. Dark circles shadowed her eyes like bruises that would never heal. She counted the bills on the sink one more time. 5 crumpled dollar bills. That was all. That was everything. She had survived 8 months homeless. 8 months living in her 2009 Honda Civic with the broken window taped shut with duct tape. 8 months of sleeping in parking lots, of jumping at every sound, of running from Douglas Hale, her ex-boyfriend, who stalked her through Boston streets with the casual cruelty of a man who knew the police would never stop him. The officers he had paid off made sure of that. The detective he had blackmailed ensured that every report she filed disappeared into the void like she had never existed at all. She pulled a photograph from her jacket pocket. Creased. Faded. The image showed a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile, his arm around her waist, both of them young enough to believe the world was safe. Her late husband, Michael. Dead for years now from a cancer that had cost $147,000 to fight and lost anyway. The hospital had come after his estate. She had sold everything to cover what insurance would not touch. And when the money ran out, they had come after her. That photograph was the only thing she owned that still meant something. She looked at herself in the mirror again and did not recognize the person staring back. When had her eyes become so hollow? When had survival become the only thing left of her? The $5 went into her pocket. She walked to the convenience store counter and bought a small bag of apples and crackers, the cheapest food she could find, items that would not spoil, items that could be split between 3 people and still feel like a gift. $2.38. That left her with $2.62 in the world. The plastic bag crinkled in her hand as she walked back into the October night. The wind came off the harbor sharp and cold, a blade wrapped in ice, cutting through the thin jacket that had cost her nothing because she had pulled it from a donation bin behind a church. What Luca Castellano did not know, what his men had not yet discovered, was the truth written in that plastic bag. Sofia was not meeting a rival family. She was not feeding information to the federal agents who had tried to recruit her 3 weeks ago with promises of protection she did not believe in. She was not betraying him at all. She was keeping a promise to a little girl. The drops of rain began to fall, light at first, then harder, pattering against the pavement like 1,000 tiny accusations. Sofia did not speed up. She did not run. She simply walked through the darkness toward the shelter on Cambridge Street, toward the room where Emma waited, 5 years old with hollow eyes and a body that was far too thin, waiting for someone to prove that at least one adult in this broken world kept her word. That was the mystery. That was the danger. That was the thing that would either save both of them or destroy them completely. But before we continue with this story, before we understand what Sofia is truly doing in the darkness and why Luca's misunderstanding of her could cost her everything, I need you to know this: if this story touches something in your heart, if you recognize yourself in Sofia's desperation or in Luca's terrible certainty, then please drop a like on this video. Share it with someone you love. Subscribe to this channel right now because what happens next will shock you. What happens next will change everything. Now let us go back. Back 8 months, to a frozen October night on the highway outside Boston, to the moment when a woman with nothing and a man with everything collided in the darkness and neither of them understood that their lives were about to transform completely. It was the night Sofia Morgan lost the last thread holding her to hope. It was the night Luca Castellano learned that mercy was not always a weakness. It was the night when 2 broken people became exactly what the other one needed, unaware that a man named Douglas Hale and a woman named Rachel Dawson were already weaving the trap that would bring them all to the edge of destruction. The rain fell harder on the highway, and somewhere in the darkness, the sound of an engine approached, not the small, dying engine of a Honda Civic, but the powerful hum of a convoy of black SUVs cutting through the night like sharks through water. The story was about to begin. 8 months earlier, the courthouse hallway smelled like old carpet and broken promises. Sofia Morgan sat on a wooden bench, the divorce papers trembling in her hands like they might catch fire. The judge's words still echoed in her mind. Not divorce papers. Death papers. Her husband, Marcus, had been dead for 3 months. 3 months. She had not known. She had not been told. The hospital had tried to reach her, but she was working a double shift at the elementary school. By the time they called back, by the time she finally understood, he was already buried. She never got to say goodbye. She never got to touch his face one last time. She never got to tell him she forgave him for the gambling debts. And now the debts belonged to her. The hospital bill was $47,000. The funeral cost $8,200. The mortgage on the apartment she could no longer afford was $1,400 every single month. She was a teacher. She made $32,000 a year. The mathematics of survival had become impossible. She stood up. Her legs felt hollow. The photograph of Marcus was still in her bag, the one from their wedding day, his eyes bright and full of a future that would never arrive. She held it like a prayer nobody had taught her to say. Sofia walked out into the Boston autumn with $1,247 in her checking account and absolutely no understanding of how quickly everything was going to collapse. 2 weeks later, he appeared in her doorway like a ghost she thought she had buried long ago. Douglas Hale. She had not thought about him in 7 years. College was supposed to be behind her. College and the boyfriend who had always needed to know where she was, who had always wanted her to dress differently, who had always seemed to find reasons to be angry. But that was years ago. People changed. People grew up. Or so she had believed. "Sofia," he said, and his voice was soft like honey, smooth like a blade wrapped in silk. "I heard about your husband. I am so sorry. I cannot imagine what you are going through." He stood in her doorway with flowers. White lilies that cost $35 at the grocery store florist. She had not had $35 to spare in 3 days. The flowers seemed like a miracle. "Come in," she said, and she did not understand that she was opening a door that would never close again. Within 14 days, Douglas had moved into her apartment. Within 21 days, he had checked her phone for times. Within a month, he had isolated her from every colleague who was male. When she mentioned having lunch with her friend Robert from the math department, his face changed. His hand gripped her wrist. "You are not going to humiliate me," he said, and his voice was no longer honey. His voice was a threat with teeth. She tried to leave. She packed a bag. She made it as far as the parking lot before he found her. He pushed her against the wall of the stairwell, his hand around her throat. "You do not get to leave me," he whispered. "Do you understand me? You do not get to make me look like a fool." 2 days later, she went to the police station. Officer Martinez had a kind face. Or she thought he did until she started explaining what happened. His expression shifted. Something cold moved behind his eyes. "Douglas is a good guy," Officer Martinez said. "He works with us sometimes. Consulting on cases. You probably misunderstood. Maybe he was just being passionate. Relationships are complicated." The complaint form went into a drawer that would never see daylight again. 3 weeks after that, the principal called her into his office. A student had come forward with an accusation. Sofia had touched him inappropriately. The accusation was false. The student had not even been in her class. But the accusation had come from a respected source. Douglas had hand-delivered it to the school personally, speaking to the principal with such sincere concern for the child's well-being that the principal never questioned his credibility. By the end of the week, Sofia had been suspended pending investigation. By the end of the month, she had been terminated. The school was very sorry. These things had to be taken seriously. She would be blacklisted from every teaching position in the Boston district. The recommendation letter they gave to other schools mentioned no specifics, just the word terminated. It was enough. Teachers did not get rehired once they were terminated. Everyone knew why teachers got terminated. Her savings evaporated. $1,247 became $800. Became $300. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday, the paper so official it seemed to glow with menace. $22,000. The debt her dead husband had left behind. The bank was taking the apartment. She had 45 days. She used her last $300 to rent a basement room in a house in Dorchester, but Douglas found her. He always found her. He knew the landlord. He convinced the landlord that Sofia was unstable, possibly dangerous. She was asked to leave by Friday. She did not make it to Friday. She left on Wednesday night with a backpack and a photograph of a dead man she had loved, and she drove her 2004 Honda Civic, which had 167,000 miles on it and a grinding sound in the transmission, away from the only city she had ever lived in. Away from everything. For the first month, she told herself it was temporary. She slept in the car at a Walmart parking lot in Connecticut. She showered at a gym with a day pass she could barely afford. She bought ramen noodles for 28 cents a package and mixed them with hot water from gas station coffee makers. Her life became small. So small. Reduced to the size of a car and a backpack and the increasingly desperate mathematics of survival. By month 3, she had stopped checking her phone. Douglas's messages had become less frequent but more vivid. "I will find you," the last one said. "There is nowhere you can hide. I have people everywhere." She believed him. She had seen him pull over on the street she was sleeping in. She had watched him show her picture to a gas station attendant in Maine. She had learned the rhythm of his hunting the way prey learns the pattern of a predator's movement. He was patient. He was relentless. He was, worst of all, absolutely right. Wherever she went, he eventually found her. The connections he had through the police department meant he could check her car registration. The connections he had through his family meant he had people watching. She was not being paranoid. She was being accurate. By month 8, she had $5 left in her checking account. $5. Not $50. Not even $10. 5. She had been let go from a job at a coffee shop because Douglas had called the manager and explained, with deep concern for public safety, that she was unstable and possibly dangerous. She had tried to work at a shelter, but Douglas had found her again. He had walked in during her shift and smiled at her with a smile that made every person in that shelter understand that she was a target. So she had stopped trying to work. She had stopped trying to hide. She had just driven. North, then east, then west, in a pattern that had no logic except the logic of running. The October wind began to cut through the city, and the nights grew cold. So cold. The kind of cold where you could feel your bones becoming brittle, becoming hollow, becoming something that could break into pieces if you moved too fast. She washed up in gas station bathrooms under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects dying on their backs. She watched herself in those mirrors and did not recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes had hollowed out. Her cheekbones had become sharp enough to cut. Her hair, which had once been long and dark, was now scraped back into a ponytail. The elastic holding it together was from a grocery store produce department. Everything about her was disappearing. Even her face was becoming smaller, thinner, less real. The photograph of Marcus was the only thing she held onto. She would take it out sometimes at 3:24 in the morning when the cold was so intense it felt like her heart had stopped beating. She would look at his smiling face and try to remember the person she had been when she loved him. That person felt like a story she had read once but could not quite recall. That person felt like a different woman entirely. On the night of October 14th, her car made a sound it had never made before. A grinding, choking sound that came from somewhere deep in the engine like a creature dying. She was on Route 128 outside Boston, heading north, and the car had other ideas. The transmission died. The engine went silent. The car rolled to the shoulder and simply stopped, as if it had decided that running was no longer worth the effort. She sat in the driver's seat with the key still in her hand. She did not turn on the hazard lights. They would use battery. The battery might be the only thing left that still worked. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus between Providence and Hartford. She simply sat in the darkness and understood that this was the place where her life was finally going to end. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just here, on the shoulder of a highway, in a car that no longer moved, wearing clothes that had not been washed in 6 days. The October wind tore through the open window, and it felt like a blade wrapped in ice, cutting through her thin jacket, cutting through the skin beneath, cutting through muscle and bone, and reaching straight down into whatever was left of her heart. She pulled her blanket, the one that smelled like mildew and old grief, around her shoulders and waited for the cold to finish what Douglas Hale had started. That was when the headlights appeared behind her. Not the gentle headlights of a concerned citizen pulling over to check if she needed help. These were headlights attached to vehicles that moved with purpose. Professional. Coordinated. 5 black SUVs, each one gleaming like obsidian in the darkness, each one carrying people who knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. They pulled up in a formation that blocked the entire right lane of the highway. Their red and blue emergency lights, hidden in the grilles, began to pulse with authority. The driver's side door of the center SUV opened. And from that door stepped a man who moved through the world like a man who had never once been told no. The October wind cut through the parking lot like a blade wrapped in ice. Sofia Morgan sat in the driver's seat of her 2003 Honda Civic, hands trembling on the steering wheel, staring at the gas gauge hovering just above empty. She had 5 crumpled dollar bills in her pocket. 5. Not 50. Not 500. Just 5 crumpled pieces of paper that smelled like desperation and old coffee stains. The car had died 3 miles ago on Route 95. She coasted to the shoulder, turned the key once, twice, a third time. Nothing. The engine made sounds like it was drowning. She understood the feeling. 8 months of this. 8 months since she left Douglas Hale with nothing but a backpack, a photograph of her dead husband, and the clothes she was wearing. 8 months sleeping in this car, eating from gas station trash cans, driving through Boston like a ghost looking for somewhere to haunt. The police would not help her. Douglas had friends. Douglas was friends with a detective named Patterson who owed him money. When Sofia called, Patterson told her there was nothing he could do about a domestic dispute. There was nothing anyone could do. She looked at the photograph again. Michael Morgan, 1991 to 2019. Dead for years from a heart attack at 31. He was smiling in the picture, arm around her waist, both of them younger and stupid enough to believe in forever. She kept this photograph in the inside pocket of her jacket, closest to her heart, as if proximity could bring him back. That was when the headlights appeared. Not the gentle headlights of a concerned driver. These were professional. 5 black SUVs moving in formation, emergency lights hidden in their grilles beginning to pulse with cold authority. They blocked the highway with the precision of a tactical unit. This was not a rescue. This was something else entirely. The driver's side door of the center vehicle opened. A man stepped out into the wind. He moved through the world like gravity itself bent around him. Luca Castellano was 41 years old, 6'2", broad-shouldered in a black suit that cost more than Sofia's car was worth. His dark hair was graying at the temples. A scar ran along his jawline, a memento from a knife fight when he was 16, when his father still ruled their neighborhood with fists and cigarette burns. His eyes were the color of winter storms, cold, calculating, utterly empty of mercy. Bruno and Gino flanked him, both carrying concealed weapons beneath their tailored jackets, earpieces connecting them to a network of men positioned throughout Boston. They were his lieutenants, his brothers in business, and they had never seen him stop for anyone. Luca approached Sofia's car with measured steps. The October cold made her teeth chatter. The diesel smell from the SUV's engines filled the air, thick and suffocating. He looked at her through the window. At the backpack on the passenger seat. At the hollow eyes of a woman who had been running for months. At the photograph clutched in her white-knuckled hand. She rolled down the window an inch. "You need help." His voice was like thunder, deep, solid, an oath sworn in a minor key. Sofia's entire body went rigid. She had learned that men who looked like this, who moved like this, did not offer help. They extracted payment. "I don't need anything from men like you," she said. But her voice broke on the last word. Broke like old glass. Like something that had shattered a long time ago and was only now falling to pieces. The photograph slipped from her fingers. It fluttered down to the floor of the car. She scrambled to pick it up, protective, desperate, her movement sudden and panicked. Luca watched her cradle the image against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. And something inside him shifted. Something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest because he recognized that look. That posture. That refusal to beg even when begging would have been easier. He had worn that exact expression at 9 years old, standing in a basement in East Boston, staring down at his mother's body after his father beat her to death. He had sworn that night that he would claw his way out of poverty and powerlessness, that he would build an empire so vast and impenetrable that no one could ever make him that helpless again. This woman was helpless. And something in her refusal to accept that helplessness spoke to the terrified boy buried deep inside the Mafia boss. "Get in," Luca said. "I will give you work. Shelter. You pay me back with loyalty." Sofia stared at him. She had no choice. They both understood this with a clarity that needed no words. The highway stretched empty in both directions. The wind howled like something dying. She got in the SUV. Bruno and Gino exchanged glances as she settled into the seat beside their boss. In 15 years of working for Luca Castellano, they had never seen him pick up a stray. They had never seen him stop his convoy for a broken-down car. They had never seen anything like this. The vehicles pulled back onto the highway, moving toward Boston, toward the North End, toward the narrow streets where Luca's empire breathed and bled and counted money by the millions. He took her to an apartment above a bakery on Hanover Street. The space was modest, 2 bedrooms, worn furniture, walls painted a soft cream color that might have been white once. But it was clean. The sheets smelled like detergent. There was food in the refrigerator. A working shower. Things Sofia had not possessed in 8 months. Luca handed her $200 in cash. His fingers did not touch hers. Food. Clothes. Start tomorrow at Castellano's. Bruno will give you assignments. Cleaning, prep work, whatever is needed. You ask no questions. You tell no one where you live. You come to work, you do your job, you come home. This is the agreement. Sofia stared at the money like it was a miracle and a trap simultaneously. Why are you helping me? Luca was already walking toward the door. He paused, his hand on the frame, his silhouette sharp against the hallway light. Because you remind me that some people fight even when they have already lost. That is a rare thing. I invest in rare things. He left. The door closed. Sofia stood alone in the clean apartment with $200 in her hands and heard herself crying for the first time in months. Not quiet tears. Not controlled sobs. The kind of crying that comes from deep places, from the places where hope goes to die, and she was crying because Hope had just walked back in the door wearing a $5,000 suit and a scar along his jawline. 6 weeks later, Sofia stood in the kitchen of Castellano's on a Friday night, her hands submerged in soapy water, washing white porcelain plates and crystal glasses. The restaurant smelled like garlic and fresh basil, like rosemary and olive oil, like something alive and expensive and completely beyond her reach. The dining room beyond the kitchen door gleamed with candlelight. Each table wore a white tablecloth, a small vase of orchids, napkins folded into perfect triangles. Italian opera played softly through hidden speakers. The clientele was the kind of wealthy that never asked what things cost because they could afford any answer. And in booth 7, the corner booth with a view of both entrances, Luca Castellano sat at his private table, conducting business with the same calm that a general surveys a battlefield. Sofia was competent at this work. Quiet. She never asked questions. She moved through the restaurant like a shadow, present but invisible, exactly the way she had learned to be after months of running from Douglas. Maria, the head chef, was 42, Mediterranean, the kind of woman who had raised 5 children on a cook's salary and still had enough love left over to worry about other people's children. She noticed Sofia's wrists one Tuesday afternoon in the walk-in freezer, noticed the fading bruises that curved around them like a hand made of shadows. Who did that to you? Maria asked, her voice gentle in the way that made telling the truth possible. Sofia hesitated. Then she told her. All of it. Douglas Hale. The stalking. The police who would not listen because Douglas knew Detective Patterson. The foreclosure notice for $22,000 that arrived the same week her mother died. The loss of everything. The $17 she had managed to scrape together before her car broke down on Route 95. I need $125,000 to clear all my debts and disappear somewhere he will never find me, Sofia said. Somewhere far enough that even if he finds me, the money I'll have saved will buy me the kind of lawyer who can make him disappear from my life forever. Maria pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, did not say that $125,000 was impossible money. Because looking at Sofia's face, she understood that Sofia already knew it was impossible. Impossible was the only currency Sofia believed in anymore. But what Maria did not know was that Sofia had been doing something else. Something secret. Something that would eventually change everything about how Luca Castellano understood the concept of loyalty. On Tuesday nights, Sofia left the apartment at 9 o'clock and took the 93 bus to Pine Street to the shelter where she had slept before Luca found her on the highway. She moved through the hallways like a ghost returning to a haunted place until she found Emma. Emma was 6 years old, with matted brown hair and a cough that rattled her chest like something trying to escape from inside her. Her mother was addicted to opioids, disappeared for days at a time, sometimes weeks. Emma lived in the shelter with nothing but a yellow backpack and a drawing she had made of her mother's face, the features wrong in the way children's drawings were always wrong, the proportions distorted by hope and memory. Sofia brought her apples. Crackers. Food stolen from Castellano's kitchen, bread rolls still warm from the oven, containers of pasta, once a chocolate cannoli that Emma held like it was made of diamonds and candlelight. You are like my angel, Emma said, her small hand gripping Sofia's jacket. I am nobody, sweetheart, Sofia whispered. Just someone who understands what it feels like when nobody else is there. This happened every Tuesday. Every Thursday. Sofia spending her saved money on a winter coat for the girl because November was coming and the coat Emma wore had holes in both sleeves. Sofia stealing small amounts of food, bringing them wrapped in newspaper, watching Emma eat like she was watching a miracle unfold. She did not know that Bruno had been assigned to follow her. She did not know that security footage from the bakery below her apartment showed her leaving with bags, moving through the city's darkness, meeting with someone in shadows. She did not know that Luca was watching. In the office above the restaurant, Bruno showed Luca the footage on a laptop screen. Sofia leaving at 9:03 p.m. Sofia entering the shelter. Sofia handing something to a small figure in the corner. Sofia leaving 47 minutes later. 3 weeks, boss, Bruno said. His voice was steady but his jaw was tight. Every Tuesday and Thursday. She is either working for the feds or selling information to the Vitelli family. She has a burner phone. Nobody clean needs a burner phone. Gino nodded, his expression dark. She is betraying you. Luca's face hardened into stone. He had built his empire on the absolute principle that loyalty was currency and betrayal was a death sentence. His father had taught him this lesson with fists and cigarette burns. His father had taught him that trust was a luxury for the weak. Put 2 men on her, Luca said, his voice flat and final. I want to know every person she talks to. Every place she goes. Every transaction. Every breath. He did not finish the sentence. His men knew what happened to traitors in his world. But there was a moment, 1 moment 3 days later, when Luca's certainty fractured. Sofia was cleaning the chandelier in the dining room late on a Wednesday night, standing on a chair, her small frame silhouetted against the crystal and gold. Her hand slipped. The chair wobbled. Luca caught her before she fell. His hands gripped her waist, steadying her, and for 5 seconds they were suspended together, her hands on his shoulders, his face inches from hers, his dark eyes suddenly visible in a way they never were. She could see the scar up close. She could see the places where hardness had calcified over whatever soft things might once have lived beneath his skin. Bruno and Gino watched from the kitchen door, their expressions frozen. In 15 years, they had never seen their boss touch a woman with gentleness. In 15 years, they had never seen Luca Castellano hold anything fragile like it mattered. He set her down carefully. Stepped back. Built his walls again, brick by brick, right there in front of her. But Sofia had seen inside for just a moment. She had seen recognition there. Understanding. The kind that comes only from shared pain. "Why do you really help people like me?" she asked quietly. "I do not help people," Luca said. His voice lacked all conviction. "I make investments." And then Douglas Hale walked into the restaurant. He was 38, handsome in a cruel way, wearing a police department windbreaker, though he was not a cop, just connected to them through Detective Patterson and a debt that kept Patterson's silence purchased. He sat at table 12 during the Friday lunch rush and ordered nothing. He simply stared at Sofia as she moved between the tables. She froze when she saw him. The tray in her hands, 6 wine glasses, each one filled, slipped from her fingers. They shattered on the floor in an explosion of glass and red wine, the sound cutting through the restaurant like a gunshot. Douglas smiled. He stood and walked over to her, his movement casual, the movement of a man who had never been told no. "Sofia, baby, I have been looking everywhere for you." His hand gripped her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You disappeared. I was worried. You owe me $4,000 for the time I supported you. I want it by Friday, or I will make sure your new boss knows what kind of liar you are." "What kind of thief?" Bruno appeared from the kitchen, 6'4", built like a wall, his expression blank but his message clear. "The lady is working. Leave." Douglas sized him up, laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and walked out without another word. But his smile lingered in the air like a threat that had been whispered and would never be forgotten. That night, Rachel Dawson arrived in a black Mercedes. She was 45, wore a designer dress that probably cost what Sofia used to make in a month, diamonds hanging from her ears like frozen tears. She was wealthy in the way that people were when they had never worked for anything, when generational money had simply appeared in their bank accounts and they had spent their lives learning how to spend it on cruelty. Rachel was Douglas's silent partner in a blackmail scheme. They targeted vulnerable women, runaways, homeless, desperate, and destroyed them financially. They photographed them, extorted them, extracted everything and left them with nothing but trauma and debt. Rachel did not know Sofia yet. But she knew that Douglas was working on someone new. She sat at booth 3, the second best table in the restaurant, and met with a corrupt city councilman about zoning laws, her voice dripping with false charm and social cruelty. Sofia served her table. Rachel barely acknowledged her existence, treated her like furniture, like a ghost that moved plates around and did not deserve to be seen. "You missed a spot, girl," Rachel said about a water glass, her tone dismissive. Sofia apologized, re-wiped the glass, made herself invisible again. "Good help is so hard to find," Rachel said to the councilman, her laugh like wind chimes made of ice. Luca watched this interaction. He despised people like Rachel, parasites who never worked, who crushed others for sport the way other people crushed insects. But what he could not know, what no one could know, was that Rachel had begun photographing Sofia for Douglas, building a file, tracking her movements with the kind of meticulous care that only comes from practiced cruelty. That night, as Sofia prepared to sneak out again, as the clock ticked toward 9 o'clock, Douglas sat in a car across the street from the Pine Street shelter, watching. He made a phone call. "Rachel, she is using the kid as an anchor," he said. "That is our leverage. That is how we break her." And in his office above the restaurant, Luca watched the surveillance footage. He watched Sofia hand a bag through the shelter window to a small figure in the darkness. The angle was wrong. The image was grainy. It looked like a dead drop. It looked like betrayal. "Tomorrow night," Luca said to Bruno, his voice empty of everything except certainty. "Bring her to the restaurant after closing. It is time to end this. Silence swallowed the restaurant. The candlelight flickered across Luca Castelliano's face, casting shadows that made him look carved from stone, and his dark eyes, storm grey and penetrating, fixed on Sofia with the kind of intensity that turns blood to ice. She sat across from him at booth 7, the back corner of Castelliano's, the restaurant empty and dark except for the single candle between them. Bruno and Gino stood by the door like sentries guarding a tomb. The clock on the wall read 10:03 p.m. Luca slid photographs across the table. They scattered like accusations. Sofia's hands went white as she looked at them, grainy surveillance images of her sneaking through alleys, meeting shadows, carrying paper bags bulging with stolen food from his kitchen. 3 weeks of midnight betrayals documented in cold, clinical detail. For 3 weeks, you have been betraying my trust, Luca said. His voice was not loud. It was deeper than thunder, more dangerous than a gunshot in silence, the kind of voice that had ended conversations and lives with equal finality. In my world, Sofia, that has only one consequence. Sofia's face drained of all color. She opened her mouth but no words came. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled like a candle in the wind, barely holding together. I have not betrayed you. I swear to God, I have not. Do not lie to me. Luca's words fell like a blade through butter. I gave you everything. Shelter. Work. Safety. A life when you had nothing but $5 in your pocket and a dead husband's photograph. He leaned forward slightly. His gold watch caught the candlelight. And you repay me by sneaking around like a rat. Stealing from my kitchen. Using a burner phone. Meeting in secret. Sofia's breathing quickened. Panic clawed at her throat because she understood, truly understood in that moment, that she might die tonight. That in exactly the way she had feared every single day since meeting Luca Castelliano, he had finally decided she was disposable. She pushed back against the terror. Her voice steadied, sharpened, became edged with something that surprised even her. I was helping a child, she said. A little girl at the Pine Street shelter who has nobody. Nobody, Luca. She is 6 years old and her mother left her there like she was trash. And I was bringing her food because I remember what it feels like to be that hungry, that alone. I remember it like it was yesterday. Luca did not move. His expression did not change. Her name is Emma, Sofia continued, her words spilling out faster now, desperate and true. She sleeps under a blanket 3 sizes too big for her. She has nightmares about being abandoned again. When I bring her food, she holds my hand and asks me not to leave. So yes, I stole bread from your kitchen. I stole oranges and cheese and milk. I stole from you because a 6-year-old child was starving, and you have more than enough. For a moment, a single fragile moment, something flickered across Luca's face. A crack in the ice. A hesitation. But it closed as quickly as it opened. Luca nodded once toward Bruno. His eyes never left Sofia's face. Take her to the warehouse, he said. Make it quick. Bruno crossed the restaurant in 3 long strides. He gripped Sofia's arm just above the elbow, the pressure not painful but absolute, immovable, like being caught in machinery. Sofia jerked to her feet, her chair scraping backward with a sound like something tearing. Tears streamed down her face but her voice did not crack. Her anger, raw, crystalline, burning, cut through her fear. You think you are different from men like Douglas, she said to Luca. You think your money and your power and your Italian suits make you better than him? You're exactly the same. You decide who lives and who is disposable. You decide whose pain matters. You are the same. Her words hit Luca like a slap across the face. Marco and Enzo exchanged a look neither had seen in 15 years, their boss, hit by truth. Bruno dragged Sofia toward the door. She was hyperventilating now, her mind fragmenting like breaking glass. This is how it ends, a voice screamed inside her head. In a warehouse. A bullet. An unmarked grave. A name erased. Emma will wait at the shelter tomorrow and no one will come. Emma will think I abandoned her like everyone else did. Her hand moved to her pocket. The photograph of her late husband was there, worn soft from being touched 1,000 times. She whispered to it, to him, to whatever might exist beyond this moment, I am sorry I could not fight harder. One tiny thing stopped her spiral. Through the restaurant window, a figure emerged from the darkness. A woman, stepping out of a car, moving toward the entrance with purpose. Rachel Dawson. And in her hands, she carried a manila envelope that seemed to glow in the streetlight like a beacon. Bruno pulled open the door. Rachel walked in. She saw Sofia being dragged toward the exit, so Luca, standing by the table, saw the surveillance photographs scattered across the tablecloth like evidence at a crime scene. For a split second, something flickered across Rachel's face, guilt, so raw and visible it could not be hidden or refined into elegance. Luca stood. His lieutenant straightened. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Mrs. Dawson, Luca said. This is not a good time. Actually, Mr. Castellano, Rachel said, and her voice was different than Sofia had ever heard it, no false charm, no ice wind chime laugh, just exhaustion and something that might have been conscience waking up after a very long sleep. It is exactly the right time. She placed the envelope on the table in front of Luca. Before you kill her, you should see these, Rachel said. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on everything. Luca opened the envelope. His jaw tightened with each photograph. Bank statements showing $340,000 in extorted money from 12 women across for years. Photographs of Rachel and Douglas at a downtown hotel, planning extortion schemes over expensive wine. Photographs of Douglas meeting with corrupt cops, their hands shaking hands on bribes. And then, photographs that made Luca's hands still, annotations in Douglas's handwriting, one phrase repeated twice, use the kid as bait. Sofia will come. Grab her there. But beneath those damning photos were others. Photographs proving Sofia's innocence with the kind of clarity that made every assumption crumble. Clear images of her handing a paper bag through the shelter window to a small figure in darkness, a 6-year-old girl named Emma. Receipts from Sofia's own wallet, her own meager savings spent on a winter coat for a child who did not have one. Text messages to Maria, the shelter director, asking if she could take leftover bread instead of throwing it away. Luca read every page. His expression shifted from fury to shock to something deeper, something that looked like shame. Sofia stared at Rachel, confused, terrified, unable to process what was happening. Why are you helping me? The question came out as barely a whisper. Rachel sat down heavily at the table. She removed her expensive earrings, and it was such a small gesture but it contained everything, a woman taking off the last symbols of a life built on cruelty. Her voice was steady but worn, like she had been carrying something so heavy for so long that finally setting it down left her hollow. Because I am tired of being a monster, Rachel said. Douglas threatened my daughter last week when I said I wanted out. I have been documenting everything for 6 months, waiting for the right moment. When I saw him set you up tonight, I realized, if I let one more woman die because of my cowardice, I am beyond redemption. She turned to Luca. Her eyes were clear, unflinching. I am turning myself into the FBI in the morning. But Douglas needs to pay first. And you, Mr. Castellano, have the resources I do not. The weight of the moment settled like snow. Luca stood. He walked to the window, his silhouette sharp against the Boston skyline. His men did not move. No one breathed. When Luca turned back, his decision had already been made. He pulled out his phone. One call. His voice was flat, final, without inflection. Vitelli, he said. It is Castellano. I have a gift for you, Douglas Hale. He has been skimming from your protection rackets on the South Side for 8 months, blaming it on my crew. Here is the proof. He sent the documents with one touch. A lifetime of cruelty, reduced to data transfer. He is at the Pine Street shelter right now, waiting to ambush someone under my protection. Do what you want with him. Consider it a peace offering between families." He hung up. Bruno's jaw tightened. "Boss, the Vitelli family does not forgive theft." "I know," Luca said quietly. Across the city, at Pine Street shelter, Douglas Hale sat in his car across the street, watching, waiting, a predator confident in his prey. A black van pulled up with no plates. 6 men moved like ghosts from the darkness, surrounding his vehicle. Douglas tried to start his engine, his hands shaking, but they were already opening his door. The lead enforcer, Sal Vitelli, pulled Douglas out by his hair. Douglas collapsed to his knees, trembling like a cornered animal, every drop of cruelty draining out of him and replaced by pure animal terror. "You stole from us," Sal said. "You blamed Castellano. Made us look like fools." "Please," Douglas begged, his voice broken. "I can pay you back." "I can?" Too late. They dragged him screaming into the van. The doors closed. The van disappeared into Boston streets. Douglas Hale vanished into the kind of darkness that swallows men whole, the kind that leaves no trace, no grave, no memory except as a warning whispered between people who know better than to ask questions. The next morning, Rachel Dawson walked into the FBI field office in downtown Boston at exactly 6:13 a.m. She carried 2 bankers' boxes of evidence. She was wearing the same clothes as the night before. Agent Patricia Morrison looked up from her desk, confused. Rachel placed the boxes down with the care of someone placing a bomb. "I want full immunity in exchange for testimony against a criminal conspiracy involving police corruption, extortion, and blackmail," Rachel said. "I have documentation on 12 victims and 47 corrupt officials." By 9 a.m., FBI raids hit 6 locations simultaneously. Police precincts. City offices. Rachel's own investment firm. Her assets were frozen, her reputation destroyed in every newspaper by noon. She pleaded guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, and extortion. The judge sentenced her to 14 years in federal prison. Not quick death. Not mercy. Systematic destruction. A decade and a half in a concrete cell, knowing she deserved every second. Her family disowned her. Her name became synonymous with corruption. But 12 women, including Sofia, got justice. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. The restaurant booth number 7 smelled like aged leather and old money. Sofia sat across from Luca Castellano, her hands wrapped around a glass of red wine so expensive that the bottle cost more than a month of her old rent. The silence between them stretched like a living thing, heavy with everything unsaid, everything almost lost. Luca stared at his glass, watching the wine catch the light. When he finally spoke, his voice came out rough, fractured like glass under pressure. "I owe you an apology. I almost killed you because I did not trust what I saw in you that first night on the highway." Sofia's fingers trembled against the wine glass. She was still shaking from it all, the fear, the near death, the realization that she had come within minutes of being erased from the world. Her voice came out barely a whisper, the sound of someone pulling themselves back from a cliff. "Why did you save me that night? The real truth, not the version you tell yourself." Luca was quiet for what felt like forever. The restaurant had emptied hours ago. Only Marco stood by the kitchen entrance, far enough away to give them privacy, close enough to respond if danger arrived. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. "I grew up in Southie," Luca said finally, each word deliberate, heavy. 1 room. Mold on every wall. My father was a dock worker. Angry. Violent like a blade wrapped in flesh. He beat my mother until she stopped moving. I was 9 years old when it happened. Just 9. I watched her die on the kitchen floor while he slept off the alcohol on the couch like she meant nothing. Like she was garbage that could be discarded. Sofia set down her glass. She had not heard him speak about his past before. This was not information he gave away. This was armor being removed. CPS came, he continued. Foster care. 6 homes in 4 years. Each one worse than the last. Foster parents who saw me as a paycheck. Older boys who saw me as something to break. By the time I was 12, I had stopped expecting kindness. By 14, I stopped expecting anything at all except pain. He paused, lifting his glass but not drinking. I ran away from the last home in the middle of winter. Lived on the streets for 3 months before the Castellano organization picked me up. I was skeletal. Half frozen. Useless. But Giuseppe Castellano saw something in me. He gave me work. He gave me purpose. By the time I was 21, I had clawed my way into his inner circle. By 28, I had taken control of the entire operation. Luca's eyes met hers. They were burning with something raw, something vulnerable that a man like him should not be capable of feeling. I swore 2 things the day my mother died: I would never be powerless again, and no child would suffer the way I did if I could stop it. Those 2 promises have defined everything I have done since. Sofia's chest was tight, her breath coming in shallow pulls. When I saw you on that highway, Luca said, his voice dropping lower, shivering so hard you could barely stand, holding that photograph like it was the only thing keeping your soul anchored to your body, I saw myself at 14. Broken. Desperate. But still refusing to stay down. Still fighting even when the world had already taken everything. Sofia reached across the table. Her small hand covered his, her skin warm against the coldness of his. You are not your father, Luca. You saved me. You saved Emma. That is not the action of a broken man. That is the action of a man with a heart. I almost killed you because I was too damaged to see the truth, Luca said. But you did not, Sofia replied, her voice steady now, certain. That is what matters. Not what you almost did. What you actually chose. The next day, around noon, Luca's men brought Emma to the restaurant. The little girl was clean now, dressed in new clothes that fit her properly, her hair brushed and braided. She looked like a different child. The terror had not completely left her eyes, but there was light there now, the first hint of healing. Luca sat with her at a small table while Sofia watched from across the room. He slid a folder toward Emma, moving slowly, carefully, like a man soothing a frightened animal. Emma, this is a special account, he said, his voice gentle in a way that made his own men exchange shocked glances. It has $50,000 in it. For your education. For anything you need. You will never be hungry again. You understand me? Emma nodded, her eyes wide and serious, too old for her age. Then she said, in that devastating way children have of speaking absolute truth wrapped in innocent words, "Are you my angel?" Luca's jaw tightened. He looked at Sofia across the room, then back at Emma. No, he said. I am not an angel. Angels do not do the things I have done. But I am someone who will make sure angels are always watching over you. You understand? Emma reached across the table and hugged him. Luca froze for a second, his hands hovering, unsure what to do with this small human being offering affection. Then his arms came around her, careful, protective, the embrace of a man who had been teaching himself gentleness one day at a time. When Emma went to say goodbye to Sofia, the girl hugged her tight, buried her face in Sofia's chest. Will you stay my angel? Emma whispered. Sofia's eyes filled with tears. She knelt down, bringing herself to the girl's level, and brushed a strand of hair from Emma's forehead. I am not an angel, sweetheart. But I will always make sure you have angels watching. Every single day for the rest of your life, you are going to wake up safe. That is a promise. The Foster family came 2 hours later, a couple from Newton, vetted by Luca's people, genuinely good. The woman had soft eyes and a genuine smile. The man knelt down to Emma's level and asked her about her favorite color, about books she liked, about whether she wanted to learn to ride a bike. Emma watched them with cautious hope, the first small step toward trusting the world again. Sofia stood beside Luca as they watched the car drive away. Emma's small face appeared in the rear window, watching them until the car turned the corner and disappeared. "That is your greatest strength," Sofia said softly. "Not your power. Your mercy." In the weeks that followed, everything changed in ways Sofia had stopped believing were possible. Luca paid off the foreclosure debt anonymously, $22,000 erased like it had never existed. He gave her a real job at Castellano's, not as a server but as manager, $50,000 per year, benefits, stability. He assigned Bruno to watch over her, a quiet presence that somehow felt like protection rather than surveillance. Sofia moved into a small apartment in the North End, the first place that was truly hers. She bought new clothes. She slept through the night without nightmares for the first time in 8 months. She learned to smile again, not the forced smile of survival but the real smile of someone beginning to believe tomorrow might be better than today. But she and Luca maintained careful distance. They were both too broken, too wary of what closeness could destroy. Their conversation stayed brief, professional, conducted in the presence of his men. Yet there was something charged between them, an understanding that did not need words, a recognition that only happens between people who have seen each other at their absolute worst and chosen to stay anyway. "The boss is different around her," Bruno told Gino one night after closing, while they counted the evening's receipts in the back office. Gino looked up, his weathered face skeptical. "What do you mean, different?" "Softer," Bruno said, the word feeling strange in his mouth. "Gentle. In 15 years I have worked for Luca Castellano. I have seen him order men to disappear. I have seen him negotiate with his rivals. I have seen him cry exactly once, at Giuseppe's funeral. But I have never seen him the way he is around Sofia. Like he is learning how to be human again." "Think he loves her?" Gino asked. Bruno was quiet for a moment. "I think he does not know how yet. But I think he is trying. And for a man like him, trying is everything." Sofia stood at her apartment window one October night, looking out at Boston's lights spreading across the darkness like stars that had fallen to earth. For the first time in more than a year, she felt safe. Truly safe. Not just surviving. Actually safe. She thought of Emma, now in her new home, waking up in a soft bed with people who wanted her. She thought of Douglas, erased from the world, a cautionary tale whispered between people who knew better than to ask questions. She thought of Rachel, beginning a 14-year sentence, finally understanding the consequences of her cruelty. And she thought of Luca, across the city in his penthouse, staring at the same skyline, afraid to let himself feel what he was feeling, knowing his world destroyed everything soft and good, yet unable to stay away. Maybe miracles do happen, Sofia thought. Maybe they were happening right now. A year passed like a breath held and finally released. The penthouse event space was decorated with soft golden lights and white flowers. Sofia stood at the floor-to-ceiling window looking down at Boston spread below like a circuit board of light and possibility. She had organized this gala, this charity event to benefit homeless women and children, had raised $125,000 in a single night. She wore a dress that cost more money than she had held in her hand 6 months ago, carried herself with the confidence of someone who had fought her way back from the edge of nothing. The elevator chimed. Luca Castellano stepped out, holding 2 glasses of champagne, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than her apartment rent. His eyes found her immediately, like they always did. "I thought you left hours ago," Sofia said, turning from the window. "I did," Luca replied, closing the distance between them. "I came back." He handed her a glass. They stood side by side in silence for a moment, looking out at the city, at the world that had tried to destroy them both and failed. That night on the highway, Luca said finally, his voice steady now, "Sure, I chose you the moment I saw you refuse to break, even when breaking would have been easier. I did not know it then, but I was choosing my own redemption. You reminded me that strength is not the absence of fear. It is fighting even when you have already lost everything." Sofia's eyes filled with tears. "For a year I kept my distance because I thought I would destroy you," he continued. "I destroy everything I touch. Everything I have ever loved has been shattered by my hands. But watching you rebuild yourself, become who you were always meant to be, I realized something: maybe broken people can heal each other. Maybe that is the point of meeting someone who understands the darkness. Sofia set down her glass and turned to face him fully. You saved my life, Luca. You gave me a reason to keep fighting when I had nothing left. You are not broken. You are just human. And humans deserve a chance at happiness. Luca reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, reverent, the touch of a man learning tenderness for the first time. He rested his forehead against hers. I do not know how to do this, he whispered. How to be gentle. How to love without destroying. Then we will learn together, Sofia whispered back. When they kissed, the city lights blurred below them, and for the first time in his life, Luca Castellano felt like he was coming home. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.